I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today, and I know we're a little bit behind schedule, so I will stay on time. I did want to say that I'm actually in my office in London, Ontario, although I am a resident of Middlesex County, living in Ilderton. Regrettably, the internet service is sometimes a little bit spotty, so I had to come into the office today to do the presentation. Notwithstanding that, I wanted to start with a quote, and this is something that I put together for our group today. And really what I wanted to say to people is that a desire to make a difference is something many of us think about. We all dream. How we make a difference is really within us. It's not in someone else's hands. Having the courage, perseverance, passion, and resilience to create something meaningful is not without risk. Listen, learn, and pivot when you need to. Only our egos can stand in our way. And I think a number of the videos pointed to the fact that it's really important for us to listen to others as we continue our journey. So let me tell you a little bit about the company and what we do. I was an academic, and I really wanted to figure out how we could collaborate better and had the opportunity to really work with some of the top researchers in cancer and oncology. And what I found is that everybody was kind of doing their own thing. And so I founded a company in 2011, Pulse Infoframe, and gave up academia in 2014 to follow my passion. And when you do that, you do that knowing that you may not be reaping the same benefits you did in your career, but you do it because you're passionate about it. And what I wanted to do was really focus in rare diseases and cancer. There's 7,000 rare diseases in the world. Most of those affect children, and most of those children die before the age of 5. And the reason there are no cures is that everybody collects their own data and they don't share data. And if I could create something, a technology that would enable the sharing of data, but not just any data, really think about what we needed to help patients, as well as to help with drug development and to continue to spur research, is really where my focus was. And today in 2021, our head office is in London, Ontario, but we have offices now in the United States over the last few years in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and Philadelphia, and our solution is globally deployed. Why are we different? The difference really comes from who we are as people. And I really say to people, it's not just what you do, it's who you are and the people in your organization. And I have to say, as a woman who trained in science and technology, I am very, very focused on bringing women into our organization because they have been underrepresented in the educational system, but can contribute in a meaningful way into many parts of what is needed in both in science and technology and engineering. But most importantly, what we do is about collaboration. It's about bringing people together, bringing the right team together, male or female, and ultimately dealing across geographies. We started in Canada, but we immediately went overseas, not to the United States where everybody was going, but really into Europe, and really understood the importance of how to collect data, but to maintain privacy and security. And that ultimately differentiated us. That was a risk, because when you do that, there is a risk that you are investing in something where you don't necessarily know what the outcome is going to be. But it was the right decision in the long run. In the short term, it was certainly painful. So you learn from that. When COVID happened, we had considerable exposure in Europe. We had just signed a large agreement to work in breast cancer and to really investigate the types of breast cancer initiatives that were underway in Europe. As you know, COVID hit in Europe in January 2019 in advance of what happened in Canada. And I thought hard about, okay, well, what do? We know that we aren't going to be able to do this work in Europe for several months, but we have technology and we've built technology. What I knew as a researcher is that, mental health is a serious consideration. And while we were all focused on the acuteness of COVID, which is obviously very important, what was also important was starting to look at the data that was coming out of Asia to show that people were still anxious. And what we did was our team very quickly pivoted and created a tool to share with the general public that would help really understand the impact of stress and the impact of stress on our mental health. And so we tried to work on something and pivot in an area that would allow us to leverage our technology really for greater good. We created something called a COVID stress monitor. And that was really for people to understand where their own stress level was, because sometimes we minimize our own anxiety because we are resilient. And sometimes when you don't see, if you can't step out of yourself and see some of the challenges you're having, they can really end up in a place, you can end up in a place, we all can, where that stress becomes unbearable. And so my team put together this great program that we started deploying, working with other countries, as well as trying to work with employers here and saying, look, wouldn't it be good for you to understand the state of stress in your organization so that when people come back to work, you actually have the tools to support them? This is not something that's going to go away. And you've probably read a lot more in the recent months about the impact of stress and anxiety on productivity, on absenteeism, and on general well-being. So that was a little pivot. We also last year, understood that we were going to have, challenges with booking the type of revenue that we had anticipated, but we had started a journey in March of 2019 to really build out the next generation of our technology. So our technology is called Healthy, and the short form for Healthy 2.0 is actually H2O, which I kind of nicknamed internally. I think about H2O or water as something that's ubiquitous. We all have data, we all wear data, we all have different devices that collect data, but we don't always bring it together. And so we just put our heads down and created our new technology, which we just launched, which I'll talk to you about because it'll show the application of something that really took a lot of team effort and a lot of hard work. Nothing in life is a straight road. As you know, there are always curves. And when we work with patient groups and with our clinicians and with companies, we have to partner for the journey ahead. And that journey ahead is sometimes a windy road. But we need to support each other to get to our end goal. The end goal for us is getting the right amount of data and the data that we need to be able to support drug development, to help people come up with treatments where there are no treatments, and to really understand the impact that patients have on their quality of life. To give you an idea, in Canada, we're in 15 major cancer centers. We have built one of the largest skin cancer registries or real-world data initiatives in the world now, and followed now by lung cancer and soon to be with breast cancer, but again, working globally in many of these areas. And so everything has to be collaborative, and that's really our modus operandi. What we did with our new technology, and I just wanted to share a quick story with you. Last week, we launched the National Kidney Foundation Patient Network, sitting in our new platform. The reason this is really exciting is that it's the first national chronic kidney disease initiative in the world. It's in the US, it's US based, and it's very exciting because the National Kidney Foundation are a great partner to us. And the value that it brings to patients is that they get to share their stories and their journey, and we collect data that really helps understand how to better treat, diagnose, and manage, kidney disease, which has a significant number of comorbidities. Now, the other thing is that we're all used to having data collected. So one of the innovations we were involved in is setting up really interesting visualizations. What do people want to know? Well, they want to know who's in my district, who has a condition like me, where are the clusters of people. So we brought in a team that was very focused on what we call user experience and engaging people, really thinking about, how to set up a platform and an initiative where people want to provide information. Obviously, everything is confidential, there are consent forms, and everything has ethics approval. But we created something that will now become an industry standard in how to interact primarily with patients and with the public. The beauty is really, too, being able to look at data. We all collect data. We heard a lot about data today, data on financials, data on different metrics, but we need to make that data come to life, those data come to life. And that's really, where we're focused is collecting information, but sharing it and bringing people together so that we understand how best to enable each of the initiatives, whether it's with physicians, patients, or with pharmaceutical companies. These are just a couple of snippets of some of the new analytic tools that we've brought to bear into the market. And really, for us, it's about engaging patients. Think about how many times you interact with a healthcare provider and then you go home and you don't remember everything that was said, and you don't remember the whole purpose. And it's not because we're not smart people, it's because we're overwhelmed with information. So when we built this, we also created a library with the National Kidney Foundation for patients so they could look at treatment options, nutrition, different things, and really be engaged, because it's about sharing and about being part of a community so that we all learn from one another. In my parting remarks, there are a couple of things that I did want to note. Given the challenges that we had as a company with the pandemic, which started last year, if not, before, with the delays in hospitals and countries coming on board, because we get a lot of our data and work very closely with sites around the world to engage patients and consent them and bring in data. I will note that, we have a US entity, and we were able to get support from our US in the US much faster than we did in Canada. And there are lots of great things happening in Canada, but I also want to ask us to think about how we continue to innovate in Canada, and more specifically, the relationship between Canadian banks and companies. Banks in Canada continue to be profitable. They make their money from services they charge and not so much from lending. And while companies like ours look at how to better source capital in Canada, which has been a challenge with financial organizations that primarily focus on bricks and mortar, maybe there's a chance for us to really understand how we continue to support Canadian companies. The US has continued to invest in innovation, and the gap between Canada and the US is getting larger. And I know that because we live on both sides of the border. But innovation requires funding and some appetite for risk. If we're able to keep Canadian IP in Canada and support women in any industry, there really has to be a paradigm shift in how lending happens in Canada. And I ask, our esteemed government, if I were going to have an ask, to really not just think about this, but let's all do something about it. I'm really delighted to see the statistics that Barb provided. But I say that, there has to be more. There is a lot of pressure in the world when you're looking at the types of companies that we have built collectively. And to be able to compete in a global stage, we really need to be supported much better than we are today.